You have heard us say the word here quite often. I think some people may forget what it means. SPAC is the word on the tip of everyone's tongue these days. And in his newsletter over the weekend, Yahoo Finance editor-in-chief Andy Serwer took a look at this SPAC frenzy, Andy, and asked what it means about us. And I guess I would just start, I've thought a lot about SPACs, written a lot about SPACs, and just based on your work, where do you feel like we are at in the cycle of this mania, and how is it different, I guess, than anything else you've seen in your career?
Yeah, we're definitely in the frenzy part of the cycle. And, as I was hitting deadline on Friday, Myles, I was just getting the latest number. So 28 SPACs filed S1s on Friday alone. I mean, that is just a crazy amount. And already we're seeing numbers that are exceeding the number of SPACs, exceeding all of the SPACs that were done in 2020. So we had about 248 SPACs last year. We're on track now for 275. And so the number of these things is going crazy. And of course, you're seeing all these bold-faced names getting into the action, both on the sort of Hollywood celebrity side and the, business leader mogul side. So, a lot of people are jumping into these things. And I have to say, and I know you know this, they're not so straightforward. They're actually kind of complicated vehicles. And so for ordinary investors, you really need to watch your step here.
Andy, who perhaps got all this kicked off? Dave Cody. You know him. You've known him for a while. You talked to him for this story, former Honeywell CEO.
Yeah, it's interesting what happened there, Brian. He stepped down as CEO of Honeywell after a very successful run there in 2017, and he told me he was taking some time to figure out what to do. And a friend suggested do a SPAC. And so he told me that he was really looking into it, trying to figure out what to do. And everyone told him, don't do it, because SPACs, historically have not had the best reputation. Ultimately, he decided to do it at the same time Goldman Sachs was looking to do one. So he teamed up with Goldman. And, Dave understands operating industrial companies or companies in that sort of sector of the economy. And they actually picked up this company called Vertiv from Platinum Equity, which is owned by the guy who owns the Detroit Pistons basketball team. And they've had a pretty successful run there. The SPACs generally trade at $10 before they buy anything. And the stock went from 10 then down to 5 in March of 2020. And now it's up in the low 20s. So that's a pretty good example right there. And he told me that after he and Goldman did this deal, they were flooded with calls to do more and to actually ask him about how to do these things. But that was in the beginning of 2020, end of 2019. And since then, we've just seen this explosion.
We've talked a lot about on the show about how this feels not great, this explosion in SPACs. And you talked to a lot of people who said essentially the same thing, but it's one stat that you put in your column that really stood out to me. According to Renaissance Capital, the average return on SPACs common stock going back to 2015 has been a loss of 1.4%. For IPOs, that's been a gain of 49%. So these things have underperformed. That's not to say that they will, but it's interesting how much they've underperformed.
Yeah. And, Julie, you're so right, because it's important to sort of compare them against IPOs, because essentially a SPAC is a shorthand way of doing an IPO. And one of the reasons they became so popular, Dave Cody aside, in 2020 is because doing an IPO last year was very difficult because you couldn't do a roadshow. And then also because of the election, there was so much uncertainty in the market. And when you do a SPAC, go public through a SPAC, basically a shell company is buying an operating company, and you can just go right into the public markets that way. You can also do forward-looking projections, which is something you can't do in an IPO. You have to be very careful about that, which begs the question, where's the SEC in all this? That's a whole other story. But the point is that because a lot of companies were sort of super aggressive about doing it this way, and so much money was flooding into the space, there are definitely some companies here that have not been such great performers. And I think also you see all sorts of mispricing going on here, which speaks to the number you were talking about of this pretty dramatic underperformance versus IPOs.
Yeah, Andy, my favorite frame is someone said, all the EV SPACs are trading like they're going to be the winner of a winner-take-all market. And I think that is certainly kind of the challenge there. Andy, I know you thought a lot about it for this story, and I kind of see it myself, and I think this way. Do you feel left out that you're not part of a SPAC sponsorship team? Sometimes I feel like I'm the mark here. How hard could it be to jump onto one of these?
Well, Myles, with someone like yourself, as I said, these celebrities, high-profile people, it's all about the deal flow. Right. So I'm sure when someone brings you in, they'd be using the Myles Udland network to get a lot of other high net worth individuals into the mix. So I'm shocked that you haven't gotten tapped yet.
I agree. I think there's an opportunity for, digital media type SPAC. I think we'd be great consultants. So anyone out there who is, and the other thing too, a lot of people jumping on these SPACs, that's kind of their side gig. So I don't see any issue here between us continuing to grind out Yahoo Finance and jumping on a SPAC. We'll see how that works going forward. All right, Yahoo Finance Editor-in-Chief Andy Serwer. Andy, great story this weekend. Thanks for joining.
Thank you.